Good evening. Good evening. And thank you for joining us as we take a deep dive into an important topic. We call this program End It Now. End It Now. We are shedding a light in a dark place. Many people have been suffering from abuse, domestic violence. This impacts not only women, it impacts men, it impacts children. Over the pandemic, the numbers rose. Foster care systems were inundated. Uh, we know that this touches home, not just maybe with you, but maybe with a friend, a family member. There is somebody who is going through a challenging time in this area right now. And I do declare we're going to triumph through together tonight. I invite you to share, share, share. Copy this link, share it. Send it to 5 other people. We're happy that you're on tonight and joining us. And we have some tremendous individuals who are coming to help us take a deep dive into this subject matter. I'm so happy to have on with us tonight a woman who is a best-selling author, a CEO. She is a domestic violence survivor and advocate. There is much more that I'll share about her. Also on with us tonight, we have a clinical psychologist and we have a licensed counselor on with us tonight. We're going to hear some more from them as we shed a light on this topic. But first, I just want to pray and invite God into this space to reach out and touch us where we are. Kind Father in heaven, in the name of Jesus, we invite you in this space to do something spectacular. Amen. First of all, it does me great joy. It gives me great joy to invite our first guest on. She is the author of this book, best-selling book that came out. It's entitled Bags in the Attic. And I want to invite Joan T. Randall to come on. Good evening, woman of God. Good evening.
Good evening, Pastor. How are you?
Listen, I'm excited that you're here. For those who don't know, Elder Joan T. Randall, she is an award-winning best-selling author. She's a certified speaker. She's an international speaker and coach. She's a domestic violence victim advocate, and she's a survivor whose mission is to impact lives to change outcomes. Since writing this book, so much has happened in your life that I know. So much has happened in your life since writing this book. And I thank you for being so willing to come on and share your story with us. Share your story. There's probably more you want to say tonight, but I'm going to turn it over to you. And I'll just say this. When I started reading your book, I couldn't get through it in one read. I cried. I stopped. It starts like this. I woke up fully intending to carry out my plan. I thought it through over and over in my mind and even did a few practice runs. I knew this was it. Woman of God, Elder Joan T. Randall, thank you. You're here to share your story with us.
Yes. Wow. Whew. First of all, let me just say thank you for being here. It's an honor. Thank you for inviting me to this space. It is such an important topic and one that should not only be discussed in the month of October when it's Domestic Violence Month. So I thank you that you are shedding a light on this at this time. So my story started with migrating from the island of Jamaica to the United States with a man who I thought was my knight in shining armor. I was a young mother at 20 years old. And when I met my husband, well, my ex at the time, my daughter was 2. She was almost 4. And he promised me the world. And because I was a young mother and I was 24 years old and I was naive, I had a tough life as a child growing up in Jamaica, but it was filled with love, right? And so I left my home. I left my 4-year-old daughter with my mother and my sister and came to the United States and developed a relationship with this man, got married to him, and had a baby. But let me just share this with you. In that circumstances, right? The minute I landed in the United States, the violence started. It started with a slap in the face because I left the house, went to the pharmacy, and did not tell him. And you might ask the question, why did you stay after that slap? Well, I felt like I didn't know where to go, what to do, or anything. Here I am in a foreign country, married to this man, pregnant with my daughter by him, and now going through this situation. Well, that one slap that he asked me to forgive him for happened over and over again. And then the slap became much more violent. I was kicked down the stairs. I mean, it was 7 years of physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse. It was every kind of abuse. I found myself acquiescing to him. What does that mean? I meant that if he was happy, I was happy. If he was upset, I was scared. If he was filled with joy, I was filled with joy. When I wake up in the morning, my whole being, my whole presence, the way I behaved was based on his behavior. I no longer knew who I was. I'd lost myself. And years of that led to me wanting to take my own life and the life of my children. And that's how my book started, because it was the lowest point in my life when I thought that there was nothing else that I could have done, or don't know where to turn. I don't know who to talk to. Shame and embarrassment kept me from telling which number. That's the first mistake. I just want to point that out. But shame and embarrassment kept me from sharing it. And so I thought the only way out was to go to sleep. And that's how the book started.
So you had a plan.
I had a plan. And my plan at the time felt wonderful. My plan at the time, I didn't recognize I was so gone. I lost so much of me that my plan was to go to sleep. And all I could think about was going to sleep. I never thought about it as dying, Pastor Tricia. I never thought about it as taking my life. I just thought about it as resting. I was tired of the tears. I was tired of crying. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of going to work. And in my heart, I am begging for someone to look at me and see the pain in my eyes. I wanted someone to see me. I wanted someone to just look at me and ask me, are you okay? Can I help you? And I would look at people praying that they would see that something was wrong, because I didn't have the courage to say it. So I was just hoping someone would ask me, but nobody saw me. Nobody asked me. And I remember one situation where I tried to run away at the train station with both of my daughters, and he found us some way. And I'm sitting there. He came and he saw me. He grabbed the baby out of my hand. And then my oldest was, with me, because at that time I'd gotten her up to the States at this point. And there was a cop in the train station at Philadelphia. And this man grabbed the baby out of my arm, walking away. I'm running after him with my other daughter screaming, and nobody came to my rescue. Nobody, not even the police officer. So I had to leave the train station caught because I was trying to leave, and went home to just terror. And it was after that that I decided nobody's going to help me. If a police officer saw me and didn't even intervene because he thought it's a husband and wife thing, then who else is going to help me? And so that was when I decided that I was going to put this plan in place.
And the plan at that time wasn't to run away from him, but it was to really escape life. Because that's, and why was that for you at that moment?
So I felt lost. I felt alone. Again, I didn't want my parents, my mom, my dad, my brother and sister to know that for the length of time that I was with him, that I was experiencing this pain. I felt horrible for my daughter, my oldest daughter, who was not his biological child, because I saw the way he spoke to her. I saw the way he looked at her. I heard him call her liar. One of our biggest fight was because she thought she had lost her lunch money. She really didn't. She had just misplaced it. And she got ready for school that morning and she said, Mom, I don't have my lunch money. It was $2. And so I went in my wallet and I said, here's the $2. And he said, don't give her any money, teach her a lesson. And I said, she's a baby. She's 8. She's a baby. I cannot send her to school without money. And I gave her the money. She took the bus. And when I came into the house, that was the biggest fight. I mean, I ended up bloodied, my baby saw all that blood because of what he did to me that particular day. Yeah. So in my head, going to sleep would quiet all the stuff that I was going. I forgot about God because there was this abuse. There was this almost like spiritual abuse because he was Rastafarian. So the whole thing about Jesus, he did not believe in. And so I couldn't call on the name of Jesus. And because I couldn't call on the name of Jesus, I almost like disavowed Jesus. And I also disavowed God because I thought that, you know what, God just left me here to die. I had a diary, a journal that was given to me, and it just had blank pages. And I would write every day. I wrote in that journal, and it was as if I was writing to God. And you can see the up and down in my mental state because there are times when what I wrote in my journal was like a prayer. And there were days when it was just me being mad at God. Why did you leave me here? Why did you make me come? Why did you say yes? Why did you even allow me to leave Jamaica, my family, and bring me into this situation? And so I had these days when I'm praying to God and begging him. And then there were days when I was just so mad at him. So I'm like, you know what? Forget about God because he's not here. He's not going to help me. So let me go to sleep. But I was not going to go to sleep and leave my kids because I didn't want them to face whatever would happen after I went to sleep. And so that was my plan, to take their lives and mine.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us. I imagine that you're not the only one who has felt this way. And because the subject matter is as such, I think it would be fitting at this time to bring in some help to continue talking about your story and diving into this, to what you went through and what others are going through. So I'd like to introduce first is Leah D. Mills Chapman. Leah D. Mills Chapman, aka the mental reconstructionist. She's a licensed clinical therapist, and she is an LMSW. She's a 2-time graduate of the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, where she earned a BA in psychology and African American studies and her Master of Social Work in mental health and interpersonal practice. She started her work with some of the most vulnerable populations. And, her area of specialty is trauma. So Leah, thank you for coming on. I know, let's have this discussion. In addition, I'm going to bring in for further conversation is Dr. Earl Liverpool. Dr. Earl Liverpool is a licensed therapist with a PhD in counseling psychology from Wayne State University, Detroit, Michigan. He is the president of Clear Choices Counseling Services Behavioral Health Clinic, and he has served as an adjunct professor at Wayne State University for 19 years. He's also taught at Mary Grove College, Spring Arbor University, and the University of Detroit Mercy. I know that he holds a lot of specialties, and he's a part of many organizations. And I will give you both the opportunity to share as we discuss. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Leah,
Yes.
What has been some of your reflections so far on what I affectionately call her, wonderful woman of God, Elder Joan, this survivor has shared?
Yeah. My mind has been just kind of receiving and reflecting on actually the children and the women that I serve in the capacity of therapy. And so one of the things that really stood out to me is this thing of isolation. And so I would love to hear from you, Ms. Randall, about how you were saying once you came over to the US, it seemed as though that's when it began, right? So not starting out directly into the relationship, was there any sorts of signs, symptoms that you might be able to say, yeah, I could pinpoint this person was going to be an abuser? Or was it more so when you came to the US that then it began?
So our relationship prior to me coming to the US was long distance. I was in Jamaica, he was here. There was no sign, no inclination, nothing said or perceived that he would be this person at all. Nothing,
Okay.
absolutely nothing.
Wow.
Dr. Liverpool, what do you think about that?
Well, one of the first things I want to commend you on is having me in your program. This is a difficult subject, and it's good to have a representation of the gender that usually is the perpetrator of domestic violence. We know that 1 in 4 women will be victimized by this behavior, and 1 in 10 men, coming from the CDC statistics. And as I was listening to Ms. Randall, um, very brave to share your story, and I heard it read at the very first lines of a book, beginning with, "You wanted to end it now," which is the topic of this conversation. But it is with a different concept of ending something. Here, we don't want to end life, we want to begin life. As you spoke, one thing came to mind. Very often people ask, why don't you say anything? And your story, the train station, unfortunately, may sound strange, but I would imagine that police officer was male. Um, uh, it was just recently I was talking to a female who went to one of our schools and was sexually assaulted, and made a police report. And interestingly enough, the police asked her, "What were you wearing?" As if to suggest or infer that she, the victim, had caused her own victimization. But as Ms. Chapman, like, by the way, I really like Leah for a number of things, but one thing in particular. You see, I have daughters, and I'm trying to get them to use their father's name, but they're not using it. I like the fact that it doesn't matter what the last name is, always going to be Mills. So thank you for representing it that way. We will never forget your father because of it.
Yeah.
And but coming back to Miss Randall, what was very clear to me is, as Leah spoke of the isolation, the other part of that is the shame, because you don't want to tell your family what you're going through, because oftentimes you end up being the one blamed. They would say, "Why did you tell us before?" Inherent in that question is that you caused this upon yourself. So I quite understand why you suffered silently, in addition to feeling there was no help. But I really appreciate the power in which you tell your story. Um, how do you think your children, your daughters, I don't know what the ages are now, but how have they been affected by this experience of their mother?
Wow, that over the years after I left and we started to heal and recover, that has been the toughest realization of my life, because my oldest daughter, I brought her into the situation. And for a lot of years, I did not recognize how much she suffered along with me. So, as much as you think you hide it from your children, you cannot hide domestic violence of any kind from your children. And even if they're not going through the physical pain, or if the anger is not towards them, they suffer along with their mother. I did not know that. And so years later, when my oldest daughter turned 18, I recognized that it was very difficult for her and I to get along. I just couldn't understand why there was this wall. If I say yes, she says no. If I said no, she says yes. If I try to agree with her, she said, don't agree with me. If I don't agree with her, she goes, why don't you agree with me? And there was this fight. I never understood it. I could never break that wall down. Years later, she said she wanted to have a meeting with me, and she had a black book. And in that book was everything written from she was age 4. She had sat down and wrote this whole, it's like a whole book. And it was a 5-hour conversation that I had with my daughter. One of the first things she said to me is that you guys destroyed my childhood.
Mm.
She said, all I thought about from age 8 until you left him was how can I kill him?
Mm.
And she said, because that was always in my mind, I lost my childhood. And there was no outlet for her. So she kept this. She told me, and I think she may have written it towards the end of the book because I gave her an opportunity to write how she felt. She said that she closed her heart from me, not because she didn't love me, but because she wanted to protect her own heart. And so she closed herself off, not wanting to bear any more pain than she had already borne throughout the time I spent with my abuser. That crushed me beyond crushing.
Mm. Mm.
You know, even as you share this account, and I appreciate you telling us about your daughter's meticulous note taking of her experience. Uh, we don't want anyone listening to think that your story is an isolated one. In the United States of America, the data tells us about 20 people per minute, not an hour, 20 people per minute suffers some form of domestic or what we call IPV, intimate partner violence.
Mhm.
That accounts about 10 million people a year. In essence, you would know somebody who may be quiet to you that is a victim of domestic violence. And we know also that victimization, oftentimes the most common one is physical abuse. But even as you share your story, and maybe Ms. Chapman can help us here, is what about the ones people don't see, like emotional abuse? How, how, what was that like for you, Miss Randall? Emotional abuse.
So that was worse than the physical violence. I mean, and the emotional abuse also was an extension of the verbal abuse because it was the things that he said that were abusive that affected me emotionally, right? So things like, I'm going to run the car off the bridge and kill us all,
Mhm.
or I'm going to drive on the side of the road and just crash the car, or I'm going to, you know, close the garage door and leave the car running so we can all die. Those things almost killed me because I believed every word he said. So again, for me, my domestic violence was, it ran the gamut. It was everything. I didn't even have, in winter, I had one black sweater. I didn't have a coat. I had a black sweater because he would clothe himself, but there was nothing left for me to clothe myself. And so when and again, you talked about the shame. The shame was more than telling my parents or my family. The shame was not wanting my brother to try and come hurt him and get my brother in trouble. So there was more, the shame was not just one sided. The shame was, I got myself into this trouble with this man. I'm stuck. I don't know where to go. But if I tell my brother, they may try and hurt him, and then my brother is going to get in trouble. So in my head, I'm thinking of all these scenarios. And because I remember when I was leaving Jamaica, my mother said, "Do you trust him?"
Mm.
And so that reverberated in my brain every day because she was like, "Baby, I don't know about this. You don't know him. I know you guys are communicating via email and phone calls, but do you trust him?" So the whole time I was getting beat up, that's what I'm thinking. My mother was warning me, but I didn't take heed. So I took the responsibility, I took the ownership of what I put myself in. And I'm thinking the only way I can get out of it, seeing the cop didn't help me. I'm afraid to tell anyone, I don't know where to go. I remember reaching out to a domestic violence place one time, and then they sent me a letter in the mail. And I was so happy that I was the one that got it in the mail. So everything I thought I was able to do, it backfired. And that's why I got to this place where I wanted to stop crying. I wanted to stop feeling sad. I wanted to stop walking around on eggshells. I wanted to be My daughters were just, they looked at me every day and looked in my eyes because they recognized the tears and the pain, and I was tired.
Mm.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was tired.
So as I
Leo,
hear,
yeah.
okay, I'm sorry, but I was just gonna say I'm listening to you, and the shame that you're referencing. A lot of times, shame and self blame, right, goes hand in hand. You are bearing the responsibility or the ownership of the perpetrator,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and in doing so, it allows them to not have to take that ownership or the onus on themselves, and they walk around with a free conscience per se.
Mm.
So my question for you is, could you share with the listening audience what this blame, if you had experienced any of it, but what did that look like? Some of the thoughts that
Mm.
may have surfaced as you look back on, right, what mom shared with you, and coming over here to the States, not truly knowing, but thinking that you knew enough in this particular individual.
So the blame, that was one of the blame, but also another thing I was blaming myself for is, what did I do to change his mind where I was concerned? Did I gain weight? Was my hair different than the way he met me? Did I not? I was like trying to find all these things that I was blaming me for him abusing me, not recognizing he had nothing to do with me. But in it, I am blaming myself. Like I was trying to lose weight. I was taking pills so I could lose weight. I was running, I was walking, I was doing all of these things. If my hair was short, then I try to grow my hair. And it was, as I said at the beginning, I was doing everything to be who I thought he wanted to be. So my whole life was based on his ups and downs. I lived my life not for me, but for, if he wake up and said, "Hey baby, good morning," whoo, is a great day. Because there were periods of beauty, of greatness, right? There were periods where he was amazing and loving and kind, and it made me think, okay, well, maybe it won't happen again. But if I wake up and I said good morning and he said don't talk to me, oh my God, I'm scared for the rest of the day. Like I'm just shit, my the palms of my hand would sweat and I would have this nervous tension. We couldn't open the windows at certain time. We couldn't open the door if the mailman come to open the door. We talk about isolation. He moved us out into the suburbs, all white neighborhood where I had nobody. He disconnected the house phone. So if I wanted to call someone, I would have to walk about a mile to get, at the time they still had payphone, to get a payphone. But I was afraid to go to my neighbor to borrow their phone because I didn't want my neighbor to know my husband disconnected my phone. So there was so much that I was ashamed of, and so much blame I put on myself. And I thought that him abusing me was based on changes that may have happened in me, not understanding it had nothing to do with me until much later.
How do you work with that? To Miss Leah, Dr. Earl, how do you work with that? Because it seems to me, Elder Jonas, you have been so vulnerable in sharing with us that there's like a shift in the way, in a way one thinks, you know, and it almost becomes normal. You normalize it, and what do you do with that when you're trying to help somebody? You know, how do you help someone?
If I may respond, um, just to go back to the emotional abuse aspect of it, because we tend to identify what we can see. When a policeman comes to the door, they can see marks on your face, they can see obvious signs. But victims usually live in the context of constant criticism, constant sarcasm, humiliation, and insults. How that is meant to break you,
Mhm.
because it attacks, as Leah said, your self worth. And when you don't value yourself, in
Mm,
your mind, you are damaged goods.
yes.
And we do live, if we can make it real, James Brown said it, this is a man's world.
Yep.
Mhm.
And we do live, and we belong, most Christian denominations are male dominated denominations, dominated in their thinking, um, headship, uh, and sometimes people may even use the Bible to give their
Oh, yeah.
position some validity. So the question is, how do you get out? Where do you get the courage? What can you do?
Right.
Well, one of the first things to attack any kind of abuse is not to normalize it.
Mm,
Not to normalize it. As a matter of fact, here in the United States, because people are constantly being insulted, we've come to normalize it as if it's okay.
that's right.
I've heard people describe, well, he didn't hit you, as if to say, well, that meant you were not being abused. So the first thing is not to normalize it. The second thing is very important. This is not about gossiping, it's about seeking help. You have to tell somebody.
Come on now. Yes,
You,
sir.
you have
You have to tell somebody
Listen,
to
I have a
somebody.
whole,
you,
I
you,
have, yeah, I have a three-step process
you
because
you
I've been
got
through
to
it.
tell
Yeah.
somebody, because I'll give you the environment in which abuse is fostered.
Hmm.
It's the environment of secrecy.
Secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
In that environment, it develops and it grows. Now, Miss Chapman, not Miss Chapman, Miss Randall talked about, not wanting to involve her brothers. And it's a very good rational statement. I can tell you, from cases I've dealt with, I know of a young man, very nice young man. If you see him today, he is just uh, a shining example of what a husband should be to a wife. But many years ago, this wife has five brothers, and one brother went to see her, and she was wearing dark glasses in the house. And they were very good friends with him. And she was washing dishes, and her brother grabbed the glasses off of her eyes. And they simply invited their brother-in-law, where they usually meet in the park. Let's go drink a few beers. And they gave him a whooping.
Oh yeah.
He has never touched her again. Now, I didn't tell that story that people go and say, I'm not
Right.
suggesting violence. I'm saying it became clear to the brothers this was what was happening to the sister. Now, that's not what I'm advocating, but the silence
Mm-hmm.
and the secrecy, you can guarantee it will continue.
Yes.
And every time somebody has been abused, you will hear the perpetrator say, "Honey, I'm sorry, it wouldn't happen again."
Mm-hmm.
You may have roses, 2 dozen long stem roses. You may have perfume. A lot of things may come your way until the next time.
I got
But
a car.
that's a cycle. It's just a cycle.
But
So number one, don't normalize it. Number two, tell somebody.
So don't normalize what? So why don't can I mean there's so much
Let
you
me
want
be
to say.
specific. Let me be
Let's
specific.
talk about it because there's some things I have to say
Yeah.
that when you're in it,
Come on
it
now.
is your norm.
Yeah.
It becomes your family's norm. It becomes your
Yeah.
children's norm. It is what shapes your brain and what you accept as it's acceptable. That's the way life is. And to break somebody's idea of what norm is from what norm is not, it takes a lot of work. So what is not normal? Could you help us? Is that okay to ask that question right now?
oh
Yes.
no, I think that that's beautiful. Can I interject just a little bit?
Yeah.
Go
So
Yeah.
when
ahead.
we're talking about this subject matter, we're talking about power and control,
Yes.
right? So that's the breaking of the verbal and the emotional attacks, and some physical, some financial. I heard you speak, Ms. Randall, about just only having a sweater, right? And so if they can allow for you to succumb, if they get you to that space, then they have your mind,
Yes.
and it is fear infused. And so, what I'm hearing, Pastor Payne, you're looking at something from a practical space, right? Like, what
What's
are
not
the
normal?
practical
What's not
things,
normal?
right? When
Call
you're
it out.
looking at abnormality within a relationship. And abnormality is the fact that love should not hurt, right? That's the entire abnormality, right? Love should not hurt the person or the object of your love and desire. And when we say not hurt, we mean intentionally causing harm. So there will be some things throughout life that will not feel so good, may make you feel uncomfortable, and you may have to negotiate and compromise. But if you are shaped in an environment that is dysfunctional, then yes, the growth process will then um, take what may have been normal, but I often say that we all come from a manner of dysfunction.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out, right, even in our child, long before we get into our relationships, calling out and identifying what sorts of things are not normal from childhood, right? Parents that may be abusive and saying things that does emotional harm or physical harm. Well, when you're in a relationship with a significant other, it's more easy to slide into that space versus that potentially not being the norm in your upbringing. So I could posit that your children, right, and others that may be dealing with this, simply because they are viewing the domestic violence, that's secondary traumatic stress. One, but they're also learning what it looks like to be a perpetrator and to be a recipient of it. And so those things from early childhood, excuse me, must be addressed, right? It shapes how you see yourself. It shapes your negative core beliefs of yourself and whether or not you will even be strong enough to pick up a telephone and call someone.
So here is my situation, which was unique. I never saw that in my home. Never saw abuse. Never saw any type, whether it's verbal, physical, never saw that between my parents. So I never recognized it at first.
Yes.
I didn't know what I found myself in. So I am
Mhm.
one of those people that was never raised to see that.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
for me, it was different. It was It was something that I never expected, never imagined. So yes, on a normal circumstances, people who have gone through abuse in childhood usually kind of go into the same type of relationship, but that was not that for me. It was not so for me. So there is so much uniqueness to domestic violence, right? And people will say, and I am a trained advocate, but one of the things that a lot of people will say, well, you must have seen it when you were younger. Absolutely not. I did not. Number two is, well, why did you stay? Well, that's one of the things you cannot ask a victim. Why do you stay? There's so many reasons why people stay. However, if you can say, let me try to help you, that's a different way of approaching someone that has been through it. So I totally understand that people get involved because of what they see as a young child. I was perfect, like as perfect could be, as a 24-year-old young woman coming to the United States. Never saw abuse and got caught up in there and stayed in there for almost 8 years until my kids gave me the courage to leave. It wasn't me. It wasn't me of myself. It was my 11-year-old
Mm.
who was putting away clothes in the attic for her and her sister, trying to say, this is not the mother I remember from Jamaica. This
Mm.
is not her. She doesn't, I don't even recognize my mother. So I'm going to take clothes and shoes and books and all the stuff, and I'm going to hide it in trash bags in the attic because my stepfather hates the attic. He won't go up there. And when my mom gets some sense, we are already packed. My kids gave me the courage to leave. That's how I left.
Okay.
The night when we had our last fight, my 11-year-old daughter said, Mom, it's time to go. I'm like, what are you talking about? She says, we are packed. Let's get you packed. She ran downstairs. She grabbed 4 trash bags. She emptied my drawer. We put 6 trash bags in the trunk of my car, 4 trash bags on the back seat. And I strapped my 2 daughters at 2 a.m. in the morning in their pajamas. And we left in our pajamas in the middle of the night. That's how I escaped. My kids convinced me that it was time to go.
What a riveting
Yeah.
account of courage um, by young people that
Yes.
motivate mom in a moment of fear and crisis.
Yep.
I think it should be noted that when we talk of that which is normal, it should not be equated to mean it is good. That when we normalize things, it simply means that's what we're accustomed to.
Mm.
And some things we're accustomed to are detrimental to our
Mhm.
health. So getting back to what I said before, it's the secrecy and the shame,
Mhm.
and oftentimes, being clinicians yourself, Pastor Trisha's a clinician. We recognize that the worst question to ask somebody is why didn't you leave or
Yeah.
why did you stay so long? But oftentimes that's not what they get from the world outside. The world outside is quick to say, why did you put up with this? And one of the things you mentioned, Ms. Randall, is the control financially,
Yes.
because oftentimes, particularly women who stay, they stay because they do not have help.
Mhm.
Now, I'm going to extend this a little bit because I know people are listening. It's okay for your friend to take you in for 2 weeks,
Mm.
Mm.
but afterwards they get tired of you. So when we're talking about why didn't you go someplace, you become like a roving sleeping bag at different homes. And so part of the
Mm.
solution has to be financial stability or sustenance that continues, because we can run to the rescue in a crisis.
Mm.
But after a while, it dissipates, and that person who, in our mind, is not in a present crisis is still in need. And we need to be able to approach this in the context of not just what we do in the moment, but how
Right.
do we sustain the support for the victim?
Mm.
So, again, even as we discuss this tonight and hear the story, let us not kid ourselves.
That is
Some people in who may be sitting next to you in a pew, you know,
yes, sir.
may be a victim of
Hmm.
domestic violence.
Exactly.
And violence is not only physical,
Right.
it can be psychological, emotional, financial also. So part of the healing for us is don't become part of the problem by blaming the victim.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And if I could add something to that, is when I ran away, I ended up going to my sister, and I ended up being homeless because my sister could only take me and my kids in for a certain length of time. And so we spent about 6 months with her. Three of us were sleeping on the bottom bunk bed while my nephew slept on the top
Mercy.
bunk bed. That's how, and we lived out of our suitcases for 6 months. And my sister just couldn't do it any longer. And so we had to leave. I got a place, but I knew I wouldn't be able to afford it. And so within 3 months of me leaving my sister's home, we were evicted. So now here we are, right? 9 months after I ran away from my husband, homeless. It is
Mm.
real. It is a real crisis. We talk about 1 in 4 women are abused, but 1 in 3 of those 1 in 4 are killed sometimes.
Yeah.
And they will take their lives. They're either killed by their spouse or significant other, or they take their own lives, or they end up on the streets homeless. So it is a real crisis out here with just anger, control, power.
Yeah. And I would also add to piggyback on that, Miss Randall. I think that goes into the stats of like 1 in 7 times, right? It takes before you
Mm,
actually make it out. And so people will accuse yet again the one that is trying to survive this pain and say, well, why do you keep going back? Because there are other like variables to this scenario, and you all are just looking at the bigger picture of you just keep incurring this and you must be all right. Well, no, there's the financial piece, right? There's the housing piece, and we know that low income housing or housing in general, we have an issue out here in society. And so going back to this, you know, recidivism of sort, like returning back to the issue, there's so much to take into account,
yeah,
to plan through the trauma that you're incurring in the moment. And
yeah.
we know cognitive brain tends to be offline when you are in a survival space.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah.
another thing too is you're thinking, all right, I don't want my kids on the street, because I'll be honest, and it's in the book. When I found myself homeless, I
Mm.
picked up the phone and I called the same man that I ran away from and asked him if I could come back,
Yeah.
because now I know my kids and I have nowhere to sleep.
Yeah.
And I would rather go back and take the beating knowing that they had a roof over their head. And my daughter said to me, Mom, we are not going back. She said, whatever we need to do, we're going to do it together. This was an 11-year. This was the one that I told you was saying that I took her childhood away, right?
Mm.
Because I think she was always having to think, I have to protect my mother. She is the mother, I'm the child, but the role has now reversed. So I have to start thinking for my mother and become like, so I can understand. It took me years to understand what that meant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so often I see this happen in women that I have helped, where their children become like the the parent.
Yeah.
It's
The
traumatized.
parentified child. Yeah.
The brain, the one that's thinking logically and like, no, mommy, I can help you. No, mommy, I'll do this. No, mommy, and it's sad. It's really sad.
Since we've been sharing, Tiffany shared 10 years of abuse. She told no one.
Yeah,
This is sharing in the chat. Thank you, Tiffany.
yeah,
She shares that she felt ashamed, never involved her family, mental, emotional, psychological. It's so detrimental, she said. It was far more detrimental to her than the physical abuse. She believed that he would have killed her
Yeah.
had she not left. Her son inspired her to leave. Prayer and children, that was her motivation.
Yep.
That's how she got the strength to leave. Like what you said.
Yep.
You know,
I
we
wanted to
could
say
be on
something.
here for a long
I
time, but guess
know.
what? It's 8:50. We have been on here, and we want to make sure. We want
And
to give you an opportunity to share.
yeah.
Elder Joan, again, we may have to do a part two, but please
Yeah.
share some, and then we'll ask our specialists on, our clinical
Yeah.
specialists on, to share.
So I wanted to just share the good because I am here, right? You can see me. I am here. I never died. And oh my God, there's so many good things. There's so many amazing things, right? I have written 14 books. I've helped over 350 people become best-selling authors. I run my own publishing company. I built a house from the ground up. I drive my dream car. My kids are educated and are entrepreneurs. God has favored me and blessed me. And I believe that I have used my story of pain to be able to shape the narrative of those that have gone through pain and have kept story buried because of shame. What gave me my breakthrough was the pen. The pen saved my life because when I left, I recognized I hated him so much that I could not get past the hate. God cannot live in a heart that has hate. I have to recognize that I needed to forgive him, but forgive myself as well. And once I recognized that I had to forgive myself, I used the pen to write what I was feeling. And as I wrote it, it was as if the pain caused me to have like this concrete cinder block down in my soul. You couldn't get past it. God couldn't live in there because it was so closed off. But every time I wrote, the power of the pen, every
Yes.
time I wrote, it's like someone took a chisel and started breaking that concrete cinder block down in my soul. So every time I wrote, it got broken. And every time I wrote, the pain got a little easier, the pain got a little less. And before you know it, my heart softened, my soul softened, and I was able to let the Holy Spirit come in. So the pastor said it earlier, doctor said it earlier about partnering, right? The first thing for you to do, partner. Tell someone you trust, not everybody. It may not even be your family because your family may go back and tell the abuser. So
Yes.
don't have to be your family. Go to a friend, go to a coworker, go to someone in your church, go to a neighbor, to a psychologist. You have to partner. The second thing you have to do is prepare. If you decide you want to leave, you have got to prepare. Okay, mentally, where am I? Can I leave and not come back? What is it going to take for me to leave? What is my mindset like? How is my children going to live? What am I going to do? How am I going to get work? How am I going to get job? And then you make a plan. You have to have a plan. Partner, prepare, and plan are the ways that you can start to figure out your escape and know that you can't be on the fence. You've got to leave and be gone, but not leave and come back, because if you leave and come back, the chances of you leaving again are slim to none. So I hope that encouraged someone.
Yes. Yes, it did. And I have to say, as we get ready, I turn it over to our clinical specialist on the way, how did I meet this wonderful woman of God? She helped me. She helped to empower me through the pen. This is the woman who helped me write my story. It wasn't an abuse story. It was a pain story. And you coached me through to get my story out there. It became a top release. God used your pain, allow our paths to cross, and you helped me write my story. I'll be forever grateful to you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I can just say one final thought, I appreciate Ms. Randall and Ms. Mills and Pastor Payne. Um, some forms of domestic violence may not be cause for legal action, but I want to make it very clear. All forms of domestic violence are hurtful and painful. So don't ever think it's a small thing that the police is not going to come. All forms are hurtful and painful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
I
Leah?
think my closing thoughts would be, and we didn't touch too much on this, there's something called bystander effect. And it's along the lines of, the biblical story of the Good Samaritan. When you see someone in pain, someone in need, see them. Don't just look and turn a blind eye as if they are not one of God's children that you should intervene with and to be able to help and support. And so I would say, as the Holy Spirit reveals to you individuals that are in pain, because He
Yes.
Mm,
will show you those that need assistance. Do not harden your heart. Do not look and turn away because you would want someone to step in and intervene on behalf of you or your loved one. I encourage us all to open up our hearts and show up for others that also are in pain and need you.
wow. Thank you. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is on the screen.
I
It's
want
one, oh,
I was just going to say they have 24/7 service.
mm,
They have over 200 plus languages. So they have translator that will translate in over 200 plus languages. You can text them, you can talk to them, you can go on their website. The great thing about the domestic violence hotline is if you are on a computer and you're on the hotline to get help and somebody walks by, as long as you click out of that screen, they cannot trace it. It goes back to animals, dogs and cats and furry animals, so they can't trace because it goes dark after you click out of it. Another thing is QT gas station. For those of you that lives in area that there's a QT gas station, is safe houses are in the QT gas station. So if you happen to be in a car and you were being abused and someone stopped to go get some gas, if you walk out into the QT gas station, they have safe houses in there. They will hold you and just keep you there until they call the authorities to help you. So there's a lot of things out here that you can have resources and help with if you're in this situation.
thank you. 1-800-799-7233 or thehotline.org. You can get help. God can give you the strength by His grace
Mhm.
to get help. Lastly, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you thought of this discussion and this conversation. We want to hear from you. We believe we need to do a part 2, but we need to hear from you. Um, you can use this bit.ly/enditnow22. Go on, there's a survey there. Please let us hear from you. bit.ly enditnow22. By the grace of God, my prayer is that our conversation would help somebody get out, get
Yes.
help. I believe with my whole heart, with God's help, we can triumph through together. You are not alone. There is help. There is help. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Please share this with someone. Once it's posted, share it, share it, share it. I was staggered by the statistics.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us, Joan Thaxter Randall. Thank you. Earl Liverpool, Dr. Earl Liverpool, Leah Chapman, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If you are interested in learning more about Joan's story, she has actually written it and it's available on Amazon, Bags in the Attic. You can Google her. You can read. She's very honest and raw. All right. This is somebody's real life.
Yeah.
So it's available to you. It's available to you. Thank you so much. Leah, if somebody wants to get in touch with you for more information, how can they do that?
If someone would like to get in touch, you can go to my website, www.intervene, and that's capital N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, ERV as in Victor, EN as in Nancy.com, intervene.com. Thank you.
NTERVNE.com.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And Dr. Liverpool, I know you're busy, but
Just
what if
go on,
somebody wants to reach out? How can they do that? Or
just
would you direct
go
them
to the
somewhere?
website, Clear Choices Counseling and Psychiatry.
And that is Clear Choices
Counseling and Psychiatry.
Counseling and Psychology.
Psychiatry.
Counseling and Psychiatry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Clear Choices Counseling and Psychiatry.com. I'm wondering if my tech in the background, Brother Jason, you could put that up for us. Clear Choices Counseling and Psychology.com. And Elder Joan, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yes, victoriousupress.com. You can just go to the website. I think Eric says, "What is your name? Who wrote all those books? I need to connect." But yes, it's victoriousupress.com.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for joining. May God bless you and let us triumph through together.
Amen.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your conversation.
Leah, thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
God bless.